Elena Rodriguez had everything. At 28, she was living the dream most people only fantasize about. Concert halls across the world knew her name. When her fingers touched the piano keys, magic happened. People would pay thousands of dollars just to watch her play for 2 hours. She had performed at the biggest venues in New York, London, and Paris. Critics called her a once-in-a-generation talent. Life was perfect. She had a beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park, a closet full of designer clothes, and a fiancé who told her he loved her every single day. His name was Daniel, and he managed all her business affairs. She trusted him completely. After all, why wouldn't she? He was always there, supporting her career, handling the boring stuff like contracts and bank accounts so she could focus on her music. Then came that rainy Tuesday evening in November. Elena was driving home after a recording session. She was tired but happy. Her new album was almost finished, and her manager had just confirmed a world tour starting in 3 months. She was thinking about what dress she'd wear for the opening night when the truck ran the red light. She never saw it coming. When Elena finally opened her eyes, everything was white, hospital white. The beeping of machines filled her ears. Her mother sat in the corner, but when Elena tried to call out to her, no sound came. That's when the panic set in. She tried to move her hands, but they felt strange, heavy, wrong. The doctors told her she'd been in a coma for 6 months. 6 whole months of her life gone. But that wasn't the worst part. The accident had damaged the nerves in both her hands. They said she'd regain most of the movement eventually, but the precise control she needed for professional piano playing, that might never come back. Elena felt her world shatter into a million pieces. The weeks that followed were even worse. Daniel never visited. When she finally got someone to call him, his number was disconnected. Her manager came once, stayed for 10 minutes, and never returned. One by one, she learned the truth. Daniel had emptied all her accounts. The apartment was gone. Her car was gone. Everything she'd worked for since she was 6 years old gone. Her family. Her mother visited twice, each time complaining about how Elena's medical bills were draining what little money remained. Her older brother came once, told her she should have been more careful with her money, and left. No one else bothered. It turned out that when you're no longer famous and successful, people suddenly have better things to do. 3 months after waking up, Elena was released from the hospital with nothing. No money, no home, no career. The nerve damage meant her hands would shake when she tried to play anything complex. The girl who once performed for presidents and royalty couldn't even play a simple children's song without making mistakes. She spent 2 weeks in a homeless shelter, applying for jobs during the day. But what could a former concert pianist do? She had no other skills. She dedicated her entire life to music. Every application she submitted got rejected. Even fast food places didn't want to hire her because she had no experience. Finally, desperately, she found a posting for a housemaid position at something called Thornhill Estate. The pay was barely minimum wage, but it included a small room and meals. Elena stared at the posting for a long time before hitting submit. From concert halls to cleaning toilets, how had her life become this? The interview was humiliating. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, was a stern woman in her 50s who looked Elena up and down like she was inspecting a used car. "You ever cleaned before?" Mrs. Chen asked. "I can learn," Elena said quietly. "Your hands shake. You sick or something?" "Old injury. It won't affect my work," Mrs. Chen snorted. "We'll see about that. You start Monday. Don't be late. And don't think you're special just because you dress nice. Everyone pulls their weight here." Elena wanted to explain that this was her only decent outfit, that she'd been sleeping in it for days, but she just nodded. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Thornhill Estate turned out to be a massive property on the outskirts of the city. The main house looked like something from a movie, all stone walls and huge windows. Elena learned it belonged to Adrian Thornhill, some big-shot CEO who was rarely home. The staff quarters were in a separate building, small but clean. Her room was barely bigger than a closet, with a single bed, a tiny desk, and a window that looked out at the servants' parking lot. The other staff made their opinions clear from day one. There were 2 other housemaids, both younger than Elena. Jessica was 22 and never missed a chance to point out Elena's mistakes. Katie was quieter but would laugh along with Jessica's jokes. "Look at her hands shake. Jessica whispered loudly during Elena's first lunch break. Probably a drunk or something. Elena pretended not to hear, focusing on her food. The butler, an older man named Raymond, mostly ignored her. The cook, Mrs. Patterson, was kind enough but too busy to chat. And Mrs. Chen watched Elena like a hawk, always ready to criticize. You call that dusting? My grandmother could do better, and she's been dead for 10 years. That bathroom mirror has streaks. Do it again, slower. We don't pay you to take naps. Move faster. Elena bit her tongue and worked. At night, alone in her tiny room, she'd cry silently into her pillow. Then she'd spend an hour doing the hand exercises the physical therapist had shown her, even though they hurt. Even though it felt pointless. What was she exercising for? She'd never play professionally again. Everyone had made that clear, but still some stubborn part of her couldn't let go. Music had been her whole life. Without it, who was she? 3 weeks into the job, Elena was scrubbing floors in the main house's east wing when she heard it. Piano music, coming from somewhere down the hall. She froze, soap brush in hand. The melody was familiar, Chopin, but whoever was playing kept making the same mistake in the third measure. Before she knew what she was doing, Elena was walking toward the sound. She found herself in a huge ballroom with windows stretching from floor to ceiling. In the center sat the most beautiful grand piano she'd ever seen. A young woman in expensive clothes sat at it, massacring the piece. Elena should have left. She should have gone back to scrubbing floors. But watching someone play Chopin that badly physically hurt. The third measure needs a softer touch, Elena said before she could stop herself. You're hitting the keys too hard. The woman at the piano spun around, her face turning red with anger. Excuse me? Who do you think you are? Elena's stomach dropped. What had she done? Mrs. Chen's voice boomed from the doorway. Rodriguez! What are you doing in here? Get back to work immediately. As Elena rushed past, she heard the woman at the piano say, That maid just tried to tell me how to play. Can you believe the nerve? That night, Jessica and Katie wouldn't stop talking about it in the staff quarters. She thinks she's better than everyone, Jessica said loudly, making sure Elena could hear from her room. Probably thinks she's so smart. Elena lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She'd been at rock bottom before, but somehow she kept finding new depths to fall to. She pressed her palms together, feeling the familiar ache in her damaged nerves. Tomorrow she'd apologize to Mrs. Chen. She'd keep her head down and her mouth shut. She'd be invisible. She had no other choice. Elena kept her promise to herself. For the next 2 months, she became invisible. She cleaned, scrubbed, polished, and stayed silent. When Jessica made snide comments, Elena didn't react. When Mrs. Chen criticized her work, Elena just nodded and did it again. She was a ghost in a maid's uniform, moving through the massive estate without making waves. The only person she rarely saw was Adrian Thornhill himself. The owner of the estate was always traveling for business. The staff would prepare the house for his arrival, and then he'd leave again within a day or two. Elena had glimpsed him only once from a distance. A tall man in an expensive suit walking quickly to his car while talking on his phone. Everything changed on a Wednesday morning in late March. Mrs. Chen gathered all the staff in the kitchen, her face more stressed than Elena had ever seen it. Listen up. Everyone, Mrs. Chen said, her voice tight. Mr. Thornhill is hosting a major charity gala here this Saturday. We're talking about 200 guests, international investors, media coverage, the works. This is the biggest event this estate has ever hosted. Raymond, the butler, nodded seriously. Everything must be perfect. Mr. Thornhill's business reputation depends on this evening going smoothly. For the next 3 days, the estate transformed into chaos. Elena had never worked so hard in her life. Every room had to be spotless. Every piece of silver had to shine. Fresh flowers were brought in by the truckload. The grand ballroom, where Elena had made her mistake months ago, became the center of activity. On Friday afternoon, Elena was polishing the ballroom's massive chandelier when she overheard Mrs. Chen on the phone in the hallway. What do you mean he canceled? Mrs. Chen's voice was panicked. The gala is tomorrow night. Mr. Thornhill specifically chose him because he's world famous. The entire evening's schedule is built around that piano performance. Elena's hands froze on the crystal she was cleaning. Piano performance? I don't care if he has the flu, Mrs. Chen continued. Find someone else. Anyone else. We need a pianist by tomorrow evening or Mr. Thornhill will have our heads. The phone call ended badly. Elena could hear Mrs. Chen making call after call, each one more desperate than the last. Every pianist was either already booked, too expensive, or couldn't come on such short notice. That evening, the staff gathered again. Mrs. Chen looked like she'd aged 10 years in one day. The pianist canceled, she announced. We haven't found a replacement. Mr. Thornhill arrives in 2 hours and I have to tell him that the centerpiece of his gala is gone. Can't we just play recorded music? Katie asked. Raymond shook his head. The entire point was to have live classical music. Mr. Thornhill promised his guests an unforgettable performance. Recorded music would be an embarrassment. Elena felt something stirring in her chest. That old familiar pull. She squashed it down immediately. No way. She'd learned her lesson about speaking up. But as everyone dispersed, Elena couldn't stop thinking about it. A grand piano sitting silent during a gala. All those people expecting something beautiful. Getting nothing instead. It felt wrong. Wasteful. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she got out of bed and did something stupid. She left the staff quarters and made her way to the main house. She knew the security codes now after months of cleaning. The ballroom was dark, lit only by moonlight streaming through the tall windows. And there it was. The Steinway grand piano sitting in the center of the room like a sleeping giant. Elena's hands trembled as she approached it. She hadn't touched a piano in almost a year. The last time she'd tried, shortly after leaving the hospital, her hands had cramped so badly she'd cried for an hour. But tonight, alone in the dark, she sat down on the bench. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Slowly, carefully, she pressed down. The sound that came out was pure and clear. Beautiful. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She began to play. Simple at first, just scales to warm up. Her hands ached and they shook, but they moved. Then she tried something harder. A piece by Debussy, one of her favorites. The muscle memory was still there, buried under months of pain and disappointment. Elena closed her eyes and let herself feel the music again. All the grief, all the loss, all the humiliation of the past year poured out through her fingers. She forgot about being careful. She forgot about her damaged nerves. She just played. She didn't know how long she sat there, but when she finally stopped, tears were streaming down her face. Her hands hurt badly, but it was worth it. For those few minutes, she'd been herself again. That was incredible. Elena jumped up so fast she nearly knocked over the bench. Standing in the doorway was a man she recognized from her brief glimpse months ago. Adrian Thornhill. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and sharp eyes that were currently staring at her with intense curiosity. "I'm so sorry," Elena stammered, backing away from the piano. "I wasn't stealing anything, I'll leave right now. Please don't fire me." "Wait," Adrian said, walking into the room. "How does a housemaid play Debussy like that?" Elena's mind raced. She could lie. She should lie. But something about the way he was looking at her, not with judgment but genuine interest, made her pause. "I used to play," she said quietly. "A long time ago? Used to? You play like a professional. Better than professional, actually." He came closer, studying her face. "What's your name?" "Elena Rodriguez." His eyes widened slightly. "Rodriguez. Why does that sound familiar?" "It's a common name," Elena said quickly. But Adrian was already pulling out his phone, typing. His expression shifted as he read whatever came up on the screen. He looked up at her, then back at his phone, then at her again. "Elena Rodriguez, the concert pianist. You disappeared after an accident. The media said you lost everything." He paused. "You're working as a maid in my house?" Elena wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. "Please don't tell anyone. I can't handle people knowing. I just want to work quietly and be left alone." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Elena never expected. "Can you play tomorrow night?" "What?" "My gala. I need a pianist, and you're clearly talented." "More than talented. You're exactly what I need." "No," Elena said immediately. "No way, I can't perform in front of people." "Look at my hands." She held them out, and even in the dim light he could see them shaking. "I'm not that person anymore. I can barely make it through one piece without pain. But you just played beautifully for 20 minutes straight. That's different. No one was watching. No pressure. The moment I get on a real stage in front of real people, I'll freeze. I'll fail. I can't go through that humiliation again." Adrian walked over to the piano and sat down on the bench. "I'll make you a deal. play at my gala tomorrow night, just one piece, and I'll pay for the best hand specialists in the world to examine you. Real treatment, not whatever you can't afford right now. Plus, you can stay working here under whatever name you want. No one has to know who you really are if you don't want them to. And if I refuse, then I'll respect your decision. But I'll also tell you this. I just heard you play, really play for the first time in who knows how long. And you were smiling, Elena. Actually smiling. When was the last time you felt that happy? Elena's throat tightened. He was right. For those few minutes at the piano, she'd forgotten about everything else. She'd just been alive. I'll think about it, she whispered. I need an answer by morning. The gala is at 7 tomorrow evening. After he left, Elena sat back down at the piano. Her hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't just from nerve damage. It was fear. Fear of failing again. Fear of being judged. Fear of hoping for something better and having it ripped away. But also, for the first time in a year, she felt something else, a tiny spark of possibility. The question was, did she have the courage to reach for it? Or would she spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been? Elena rested her aching hands on the piano keys one more time, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingers. Tomorrow would either be her comeback or her final goodbye to the person she used to be. She just had to decide which one she wanted it to be. Elena didn't sleep at all that night. She lay in her tiny bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself on stage, frozen with fear, unable to play while hundreds of people stared at her in disappointment. But she also remembered how it felt to play again. That rush of emotion, that connection to something bigger than herself. She'd forgotten how much she needed music like breathing. At 6 in the morning, she made her decision. She found Adrian in his study, already dressed in a suit despite the early hour. He looked up when she knocked. I'll do it, Elena said before she could change her mind. I'll play tonight. Adrian's face broke into a smile. You won't regret this. I already regret it, Elena said, but there was a tiny hint of humor in her voice. What do you want me to play? Whatever you choose. I trust you. The rest of the day was a blur. While the other staff prepared for the gala, Adrian took Elena into the city to a boutique he knew. The shop owner brought out dress after dress, each one more beautiful than the last. Elena finally chose a deep blue gown that reminded her of the dresses she used to wear on stage. When she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Perfect, Adrian said. Now there's something you need to know. Some of the guests tonight might recognize you. Are you prepared for that? Elena's stomach clenched. I don't have a choice now, do I? Back at the estate, Elena spent 2 hours in the ballroom practicing. Her hands cramped twice, forcing her to stop and stretch. But slowly, painfully, the music came back to her. She chose Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most challenging pieces in classical music. It was risky, maybe stupid, but if she was going to do this, she wanted to play something that mattered. At 5 o'clock, Mrs. Chen found her in the ballroom. Mr. Thornhill told me you're performing tonight, Mrs. Chen said, her voice cold. I don't know what game you're playing, Rodriguez, but don't embarrass this household. We all have jobs on the line here. I understand, Elena said quietly. Mrs. Chen started to leave, then turned back. Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that? Would you have believed me if I had? Mrs. Chen had no answer to that. By 7, the estate was filled with guests. Elena watched from a side room as wealthy people in expensive clothes filled the ballroom. She recognized some faces from her old life. Business executives, socialites, a few music critics who had once praised her work. Her hands started shaking worse than ever. Hey, Adrian appeared beside her. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. I'm not ready, Elena admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. At 7:30, Adrian stepped onto the small stage and addressed the crowd. Elena only caught pieces of his speech through her panic, something about arts funding and community support and honoring excellence. Then she heard her cue. Tonight we have a very special performance. Please welcome our pianist for the evening. Elena walked out onto the stage. The moment the lights hit her, she heard the whispers start. Hundreds of voices all talking at once. Is that Elena Rodriguez? No way. She disappeared years ago. I heard she lost everything. Wasn't there some scandal with her fiancé? She looks terrible. What happened to her? Elena's vision blurred. This was a mistake. A huge mistake. She should have stayed invisible. She should have kept scrubbing floors and kept her mouth shut. She sat down at the piano, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't even place them on the keys properly. The whispers got louder. Someone in the back laughed. Then she saw Jessica and Katie watching from the servants' entrance. Jessica had her phone out, probably recording, a smirk on her face. Mrs. Chen stood nearby with her arms crossed, looking like she expected disaster. Elena closed her eyes. All these people wanted to see her fail. They wanted confirmation that she was just a has-been, a cautionary tale about fame and falling from grace. But then she thought about the past year. Sleeping in shelters, being mocked daily, scrubbing toilets while her hands screamed in pain. She'd survived all of that. What were a few hundred judgmental people compared to that? She opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. The first notes of Rachmaninoff filled the ballroom and the whispers stopped. Elena poured everything into that performance. Every humiliation, every loss, every moment of despair, but also every small victory. Every morning she got up despite wanting to give up. Every night she'd practiced her hand exercises even when it seemed pointless. Her hands hurt. God, they hurt so badly. But she kept playing. The concerto built and built, the music swelling until it filled every corner of the massive room. Elena forgot about the audience. She forgot about her fears. There was only the music and her damaged hands coaxing beauty from the piano despite everything that had tried to break her. When she played the final note, silence filled the ballroom. Elena's heart sank. They hated it. She'd failed. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, then another. Then the entire room erupted into applause. People were standing. Some were crying. The music critics who had once reviewed her concerts were on their feet, applauding harder than anyone. Elena stood up from the piano, her legs shaky, and took a small bow. The applause got louder. She looked over at the servants' entrance. Jessica's smirk was gone, replaced by shock. Katie's mouth hung open. Even Mrs. Chen looked stunned. Adrian appeared on stage beside her, gently taking her arm as if he knew she might collapse at any moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "Elena Rodriguez." The applause continued for what felt like forever. Eventually, Adrian led her off stage to a private room. Elena's hands were cramping badly now, the pain catching up to her. But she was smiling. "Actually smiling, you did it," Adrian said. That was incredible. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open. A woman in a designer dress stormed in, her face twisted with anger. She was beautiful in a cold, calculated way, with perfect hair and perfect makeup and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. "Adrian," the woman said, ignoring Elena completely. "We need to talk now." "Victoria," Adrian said, his voice suddenly tired. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here because apparently you're making a fool of yourself, again." Victoria finally looked at Elena, her gaze sweeping over her with obvious disdain. "This is your big surprise? A washed-up pianist who works as your maid? Do you have any idea how this looks?" "It looks like I hosted an incredible performance," Adrian said calmly. "It looks like you're being manipulated by some desperate woman who's trying to use you to revive her dead career." Victoria turned to Elena. "I know who you are. I know about the scandal with your fiancé. I know you lost everything because you were too stupid to protect yourself." Elena felt like she'd been slapped. All the joy from the performance drained away. "That's enough," Adrian said sharply. But Victoria wasn't finished. "I'm doing you a favor, Adrian. This woman is a disaster waiting to happen. Mark my words, associating with her will destroy your reputation and your business." She looked at Elena again. "You should go back to wherever you've been hiding. Nobody wants a has-been who couldn't even keep her own life together." Victoria left in a cloud of expensive perfume. Elena stood frozen, Victoria's words echoing in her head. "Don't listen to her," Adrian said. "She's just jealous and bitter. We used to date and she's never forgiven me for ending it." But the damage was done. Elena's hands were still cramping, her body exhausted from the performance. And now this reminder that no matter how well she played, some people would always see her as a failure. "I need to rest," Elena said quietly. "Thank you for tonight." "For everything. But I think I should go back to my room now." "Elena, wait." But she was already leaving, walking quickly through the corridors until she reached the staff quarters. Jessica and Katie were there, their earlier shock replaced with something else. Something that looked like resentment mixed with newfound respect. So you really were famous, Jessica said. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? Elena asked. Jessica didn't have an answer. That night, Elena lay in bed with her aching hands pressed against her chest. She'd done what she thought was impossible. She'd played in front of hundreds of people and received a standing ovation, but Victoria's words kept playing in her mind. Was she just a desperate woman clinging to past glory? Was she going to ruin Adrian's reputation by being associated with him? And more importantly, what happened now? She couldn't go back to being invisible, not after tonight. Everyone knew who she was. The staff would treat her differently. The world would have questions. Elena had wanted a second chance, but she was starting to realize that second chances came with their own complications. Outside her window, she could hear the gala continuing. Music and laughter floated through the night air. Somewhere in that crowd, people were probably already talking about her, forming opinions, making judgments. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Elena just wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. Elena woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing nonstop. She'd turned it off months ago to save battery, but someone must have charged it. When she looked at the screen, her heart stopped. 63 missed calls, over 200 text messages, and her social media accounts, which she hadn't checked in over a year, were exploding with notifications. Videos from the gala were everywhere. Someone had recorded her entire performance and posted it online. Within 12 hours, it had been viewed millions of times. The comment section was a war zone. She's back. I knew she couldn't stay away from music. This is so inspiring. She lost everything and still plays like an angel. Attention seeker. She probably faked the whole injury for sympathy. Working as a maid? Yeah, right. This is clearly a publicity stunt. Elena felt sick. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. The whole world watching her, judging her, picking apart every piece of her life. There was a sharp knock on her door. Mrs. Chen stood outside, looking more uncomfortable than angry. Mr. Thornhill wants to see you in his study. Now. Elena threw on her maid uniform and hurried to the main house. Her heart pounded with each step. Was he going to fire her? Tell her that Victoria was right, that she was too much trouble? But when she entered the study, Adrian was smiling. Several newspapers were spread across his desk. Your headline news, he said. Every major publication is talking about your performance. The arts community is calling it the comeback of the decade. I don't want to be headline news, Elena said. I just want to be left alone. Adrian's smile faded. I understand, but that's not really an option anymore. Your performance last night changed things. I've had 20 calls this morning from concert venues wanting to book you. 3 record labels want to talk. And, he hesitated, several journalists want interviews. No, Elena said immediately. No interviews. No concerts. I can't do this again. Elena, this is your chance to rebuild your career. Everything you lost, I said no. Her voice was sharper than she intended. I played last night because you asked. That's done now. I just want to go back to work. But going back to work wasn't simple anymore. The other staff treated her completely differently. Jessica and Katie whispered whenever she walked by, but now it wasn't mockery. It was something worse. Resentment mixed with forced politeness. Could you help me with this, Elena? Jessica asked in a fake sweet voice. Or are you too famous now to clean toilets with the rest of us? Mrs. Chen gave her the worst assignments, like she was testing her. If you're staying on as a maid, then you'll work like a maid. No special treatment. Elena scrubbed floors until her hands screamed. She cleaned bathrooms and polished silver and tried to pretend her life hadn't just exploded all over again. 3 days after the gala, things got worse. Elena was dusting the library when she overheard Adrian on the phone in the next room. His voice was tense. I don't care what the board thinks, Richard. My personal life is my business. A pause. The gala was incredibly successful. We raised twice our goal. The publicity has been overwhelmingly positive. Another pause, longer this time. I'm not firing her. She's talented and she deserves a second chance. If the board has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. Elena's hands froze on the bookshelf. The board was pressuring him because of her? That evening she found a note slipped under her door. It wasn't signed, but she recognized the handwriting as Jessica's. Thought you should see this. Attached was a printout of an online article. The headline made Elena's blood run cold. Elena Rodriguez, talent or trouble? Inside the scandal that destroyed her career. The article went into brutal detail about Daniel, her ex-fiancé, how he'd stolen from her, how she'd supposedly been too trusting and financially irresponsible. It quoted anonymous sources saying she'd been difficult to work with, temperamental, unreliable. But the worst part was at the end. The article claimed that Adrian Thornhill was risking his company's reputation by associating with someone with such a troubled past. It implied that Elena was manipulating him, using him to rebuild her career. Elena read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Some of it was lies, but some of it was true. She had been too trusting. She had lost everything. And now she was dragging Adrian down with her. The next morning, Elena went to Adrian's study. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. "I'm leaving," she said before he could speak. "I'll pack my things and be gone by tonight." "Elena, no, that article was right. I'm causing problems for you. Your board is upset. Victoria's spreading rumors. And I can't," her voice cracked, I can't watch another person get hurt because of me." "You're not causing problems. Victoria is. She's been calling board members, feeding them lies, trying to turn them against me." Elena felt cold. "Why? What does she want?" "Me. She wants me back and she sees you as competition. She's done this before. Destroyed people's reputations when they got in her way. She's vindictive and she's connected and she knows exactly how to manipulate people." "Then I definitely need to leave. I can't fight someone like that." Adrian stood up and walked around his desk. "What if we fought back? How? I have no money, no connections, nothing. She has everything. You have the truth. And I have resources. Elena, your ex-fiancé stole from you, right? That's a crime. Has anyone actually investigated what happened to your money?" Elena shook her head. "I couldn't afford a lawyer. The police said it was a civil matter. Everyone told me to just move on. Let me hire investigators. Let me find out what really happened. If Daniel committed fraud, he should face consequences. And if we can prove what he did, it clears your name. Why would you do that for me?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Because you're talented and you deserve better. Because I watched you play through pain and fear and give one of the best performances I've ever heard. And because," he hesitated, "I care about what happens to you." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd been alone for so long, fighting by herself, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone on her side. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian hired a team of private investigators and lawyers. What they discovered made Elena sick with anger. Daniel hadn't just stolen from her. He'd been running a scheme for years, targeting successful artists. He'd find someone talented and vulnerable, become their manager or partner, gain access to their finances, and slowly drain their accounts. Elena was his 4th victim, and he was still doing it. Right now, he was living in Spain under a fake name, managing a young violinist who had no idea what was coming. "We have enough evidence to press charges," Adrian's lawyer told them. "But it will mean going public. Media attention, court appearances, all of it." Elena looked at Adrian. "Will this hurt your company?" "I don't care about that. This is about justice," but Elena cared. She'd already caused him enough trouble. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that young violinist in Spain, about to lose everything like Elena had. About how Daniel was probably charming her, making her feel special while planning to destroy her life. The next morning, Elena made her decision. "File the charges," she told the lawyer. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop him." The news broke 2 days later. International arrest warrant for Daniel Chen, wanted for fraud and theft. Elena's name was all over the media again, but this time the story was different. This time she wasn't the fool who lost everything. She was the victim who fought back, but Victoria wasn't done. The morning the arrest warrant was announced, Victoria called a press conference. Elena watched it on the kitchen television with the other staff members. "Adrian Thornhill is being manipulated," Victoria said to a room full of reporters. "This woman has convinced him to waste company resources on a personal vendetta. The board has lost confidence in his judgment. There will be a vote next week to remove him as CEO." Jessica let out a low whistle. "She's really going after him." "This is all Elena's fault," Katie muttered. Mrs. Chen shot Katie a sharp look. "That's enough." But Elena knew Katie was right. This was her fault. Adrian was about to lose everything because he'd tried to help her. That evening, Adrian found Elena sitting alone in the ballroom, staring at the piano. "I heard about the vote," she said. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Victoria's been planning this for months. You were just the excuse she needed. What are you going to do? Adrian sat down on the piano bench. Fight, and I could use your help. My help? How can I possibly help? He smiled, and for the first time since the press conference, it reached his eyes. You're going to play. What? The board vote is in 5 days. Before they vote, I'm hosting an emergency shareholders meeting. I'm going to show them exactly what this company stands for and why I make the decisions I make. And you're going to perform. You're going to show them that taking chances on people, on art, on second chances, that's not weakness. It's strength. Elena's hand started shaking. Adrian, I can't. Yes, you can. You've already done the hard part. You've already proven you can rise from nothing. Now you just need to do it one more time. Elena looked at the piano, then at Adrian. He believed in her. Even when she'd cost him everything, even when his entire career was on the line, he still believed in her. Okay, she said. I'll play. That's my girl. They had 5 days to prepare. 5 days to save Adrian's career, and maybe, just... The 5 days before the shareholders' meeting felt like 5 years. Elena practiced until her hands bled. Literally. The nerve damage meant she had to push twice as hard to get half the result, and her body was paying the price. Adrian spent his days preparing his defense, gathering evidence of every successful decision he'd made as CEO. At night, he'd sit in the ballroom and listen to Elena practice, offering quiet encouragement when her hands cramped so badly she had to stop. We're quite a pair, he said one evening after Elena had to pause for the 3rd time. You fighting to play piano again, me fighting to keep my job. Both of us too stubborn to quit. Maybe we're just stupid, Elena said, flexing her aching fingers. Maybe. But I'd rather be stupid and trying than smart and giving up. On the 3rd day, Elena's lawyer called with news. Daniel had been arrested in Spain. The young violinist he'd been scamming was safe, and authorities had found evidence linking him to 6 other victims. The case was solid. You did it, Adrian said when she told him. You stopped him, but the victory felt hollow. Daniel's arrest made international news, which meant more media attention on Elena. More reporters camping outside the estate gates. More articles digging into every detail of her past, and Victoria used every single one of them against Adrian. He's obsessed with this disgraced pianist, Victoria told anyone who would listen. He's spending company resources on her personal drama. He's lost perspective. The company needs leadership that puts business first. 2 days before the meeting, Mrs. Chen found Elena in the kitchen at 2 a.m, soaking her swollen hands in ice water. You're going to permanently damage them if you keep pushing this hard, Mrs. Chen said. I know. Then why do it? Elena looked up at the older woman. Because Adrian put everything on the line for me. The least I can do is give him my best, even if my best destroys my hands in the process. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised Elena. I was wrong about you. I thought you were just another entitled person who'd fallen on hard times and would complain about it forever. But you're tougher than most people I've met. You've earned my respect, Rodriguez. Thank you, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after you help save Mr. Thornhill's job. The morning of the shareholders' meeting, Elena woke up feeling sick with anxiety. This wasn't like the gala, where failure only hurt her pride. Today, if she messed up, Adrian lost everything. The meeting was held in the estate's conference hall, transformed for the occasion. 200 shareholders filled the seats along with board members, media representatives, and various executives. Victoria sat in the front row, looking confident and beautiful in a white designer suit. Adrian presented first. He walked them through financial reports, successful ventures, growth projections. His voice was steady and professional, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. He was fighting for his life's work. When he finished, the board chairman stood up. Mr. Peterson was a gray-haired man in his 70s who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. Thank you, Mr. Thornhill. Now, we've heard concerns about your recent decisions, specifically your personal involvement with a staff member and the use of company resources for matters unrelated to business. Would you care to address these concerns? Victoria leaned forward in her seat, a slight smile on her face. Adrian looked directly at the board. I would. 6 months ago, I made a decision to host a charity gala. Many of you questioned that decision, said it was a waste of money and time. That gala raised $3 million for arts education and generated positive media coverage worth 10 times that amount. It was successful because I took a chance on something I believed in. He paused. I've built this company by recognizing potential that others miss, by investing in people and ideas that seem risky, but have real value. Yes, I helped Elena Rodriguez. I hired investigators to catch a criminal who was defrauding artists. That criminal is now in custody, and 6 victims are getting their money back. If that's a waste of company resources, then I'm guilty as charged. That's not the point, Victoria called out. The point is you let personal feelings cloud your judgment. No, Adrian said firmly. The point is I made a business decision to invest in talent, and I'm about to prove to all of you why that was the right call. Elena, would you join me? Elena stood up from the back of the room where she'd been sitting. Every eye turned to her as she walked down the aisle. Her hands were shaking. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She sat down at the piano that had been placed at the front of the room. The same piano she'd played at the gala. The same piano she'd practiced on until her hands bled. This is ridiculous, Victoria said. We're here to discuss business, not watch a concert. Music is business, Adrian said. Art is business. Investing in human potential is business. And you're about to see exactly what that means. Elena placed her hands on the keys. They were shaking badly, worse than they had at the gala. She looked out at the sea of faces. Hard, skeptical faces. People who thought she was a distraction, a mistake, a waste of time. Then she found Adrian in the crowd. He nodded at her, just once. But it was enough. Elena began to play. She'd chosen a different piece this time. Not Rachmaninoff, but something she'd composed herself during those long, dark months when she had nothing. She called it Rising, and it told the story of losing everything and finding the strength to rebuild. The music started soft and broken, like her damaged hands. Notes that stumbled and fell, but slowly, painfully, it built into something stronger, something that refused to give up. The melody climbed higher and higher until it filled the entire room with sound. Elena's hand screamed in pain. She could feel something tearing in her left hand, probably scar tissue breaking. But she kept playing. She poured everything into those keys. Every night she'd cried herself to sleep. Every morning she'd forced herself to get up. Every moment she'd wanted to quit but didn't. When she played the final note, her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the piano bench to steady them. Blood spotted the keys from where her fingertips had split open. Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Mr. Peterson, the board chairman who never smiled, was on his feet applauding. One by one, the shareholders stood. Even some of the board members who'd been pushing for Adrian's removal were standing. Victoria remained seated, her face pale with fury. That, Adrian said into the microphone, is what happens when you invest in people, when you give someone a second chance, when you look past the surface and see real value. This company has always been about more than just profit. It's about making a difference. And I won't apologize for that. The vote happened an hour later. Adrian kept his position as CEO by a narrow margin. It wasn't overwhelming support, but it was enough. After the meeting, Elena sat in the estate's garden, her bandaged hands resting in her lap. A doctor had looked at them, said she'd done serious damage, that she needed to rest for at least 3 months if she wanted to play again. Adrian found her there as the sun was setting. "You saved my job," he said, sitting beside her. "You saved my life first," Elena replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Adrian said, "I have an offer for you. I'm starting a foundation for artists who've fallen on hard times. People like you who deserve a second chance. I want you to run it. Me? I can't even play piano anymore without bleeding. Your hands will heal, and even if they don't fully recover, you have something more valuable than perfect technique. You have perspective. You understand what it's like to lose everything and fight your way back." Elena looked at her bandaged hands. A year ago, she would have said no. She would have been too proud to accept help, too embarrassed to admit she needed it. But she'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." 3 months later, Elena stood in the newly opened Thornhill Arts Foundation building. Her hands had healed enough to play again, though never at the professional level she'd once achieved. But that was okay. She'd found a new purpose. The foundation helped dozens of artists every month. Musicians who'd lost their ability to perform, dancers recovering from injuries, painters struggling with illness. Elena knew exactly what they were going through, and she made sure each one got the support she'd never had. Adrian was there on opening day, cutting the ribbon alongside Elena. Their relationship had grown into something neither of them had expected, something real and solid and built on mutual respect. Speech time, Adrian whispered to her as the crowd gathered. Elena stepped up to the microphone, looking out at all the faces, artists she was helping, staff members who'd once mocked her and now respected her, media representatives who were calling her an inspiration instead of a cautionary tale. "A year ago, I had nothing," she began. "I was sleeping in homeless shelters and scrubbing floors. I thought my life was over. But I learned something important during that time. Falling isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a different chapter." She paused, looking at Adrian. "We all need help sometimes. We all stumble and fall. The question isn't whether you'll face hard times. It's what you'll do when you're on the ground. Will you stay there? Or will you reach for the hand that's offered and pull,